Thank God it's Friday, July 29th, 2016. I now have some quality time to spend with my servers, specifically the E300 and E200 small form factor Xeon D Supermicro systems. Now I'm going to slide the watt meter out for a moment and give you a quick look at the size comparison. Why? Because someone wrote in to tinkertry.com and left a comment right in the website, hoping that two of these machines side by side would actually fit in a rack. We know they're 1U high, but are they less than 19 inches wide? And I think I just answered that question in a very visual way. Comes out to 18 and 1/16 inch, basically 18 inches wide for the two. All right. And I don't have a meter stick handy. Sorry. All right, let's move along. How about weight? Well, before measuring the weight, you'd probably want to put a hard drive in there and put a lid on it, right? So assemble the machines again. So I have some good news to share. I'm going to set these aside for a moment, and we'll talk about the test plan that is materialized over the last 24 hours. And it really became solidified when UPS arrived at like 7:30 tonight. Thankfully, just in time for a bit of a surprise storage vendor that pulled through. The other big names did not. All right, so announcing, quick look at some of the multiple storage devices I'll be testing. Tonight, all I have is some 2.5 inch drives, but you know what? That'll be okay to get Windows 10 activated by midnight for free, all right? And the company is Micron. So I've already covered a whole lot of Samsung and Intel, but they don't have their new stuff out, like the Samsung 960 Evo or Pro. The follow-on to the popular 950 Pro is not out yet. So my options were limited for these systems. But I also wanted, especially if I try to do home vSAN, 10 gig home vSAN, let's think about that for a moment, kind of like a RAID 6 of 3 systems tied together with 10 gig copper cabling, affordably, meaning like $7 Cat 7 cables will do it. Well, that's pretty exciting. And then finally, a gigabit switch that I'm going to be showing you later on. A 10 gig switch that's quiet and doesn't use more watts than these servers combined. So here are the drives we're getting started with. I got 4. Why? Because I have another announcement. An Intel NUC, the Skull Trail Core i7 mobile system will be joining the hardware that I'm looking at. I will only have the Skull Trail system for a couple weeks, but we'll be able to compare it to the Xeon D. It has a GPU, so it's more focused on, you know, people doing HDPC or gaming, but of course, rather prominent is people trying ESXi on there as well, and that's gone pretty well after Purple Screen of Death was very quickly resolved with a simple BIOS tweak. So let's get into the hardware tonight. Putting in 2 of these drives. I'll probably go ahead and do, time lapse. You already saw me go over the innards yesterday, and installing them is just a matter of screwing them to the metal plate. Now I will need to also see if I have enough screws. So it's time to get to work assembling. Okay, you remember the parts box I showed you yesterday? We're starting with the E200. Well, it's got baggies inside, and it's the HDD bag we're after. So will these fit an SSD like this, where we certainly don't need to make the bracket or use the bracket to make it taller. We just want to directly fasten it to the underside of this metal plate. So first, start with making sure I am assembling this correctly, and that would be through these slots, sliding it back, and securing with 2 screws. That means the hard drive is going like that underneath, with SATA sticking right out the rear. So now we know the attachment points are those 4 screw holes. Next, install. I still have my iFixit PH2 there, because it just so happens I didn't have any other Phillips heads that fit perfectly laying around when I was doing last night's unboxing and lid opening videos. The last 2 nights, actually. Alright, so we got 4 screws that came with it. Simple enough to go ahead and install the hard drive. So once I get M.2 to storage, if it's going to fit, again, this one looks suspiciously short for a 22-110 device. But anyhow, I'll have to borrow my own Samsung 950 if that's the case. So I'm going to be weighing the system, putting it together with just a single 2.5-inch SSD. Obviously, the weight gain by putting in an M.2 later on when it arrives, hopefully Monday, 3 more days, is minimal. I'm more interested in getting these things powered up with an operating system, not just going into the BIOS to get an idea what the fan does. Okay, that's what people want to know, and I can understand that. I will also say, as I'm working on this, that somebody I know ordered an E300 last week. I think it was Friday, so a week ago today, and his shipment should arrive in his New England address something like next week. So he's had to wait a little bit because he knew he was back ordering. Wired Zone did not claim to have them in stock. It was okay. So he got a shipment notice. I believe that it's expected to go out early next week, something like that. All right, so getting this in while talking. I'm struggling a little bit on that last one there. Okay, now it's in. So all I'm doing is kind of dry fitting and seeing how things go, but there's some stuff to think about here. We got to get the drive hooked up without impinging on a fan that is not installed, so I think we're starting to see why that third fan might not be there. And then also we have this mystery thin cable. Okay. Now, if it's going to be doing some kind of flickering for an LED, great. Not exactly crucial, right? But I'm taking a look at the motherboard now to see if I spot where that could possibly be fastened. The design, or the style of connector there is much like laptops. So let me take a look here. I installed this. That took quite a bit of downforce, by the way, to get that Molex connector in. Again, I expressed yesterday that this seems a little bit in the way of some airflow. Not a big deal. And I already talked about the fan headers there. So some tiny jumper here in the front, nothing to do with that connector. So I think I'm going to just move on. And maybe if we get a hardware maintenance manual at some point, this sure looks like the very similar design what I'm used to with the Xeon D1541 I have. But this motherboard's called a revision 2.00. of a different part number from anything I've ever used. And again, I'm just not spotting where that's 3 pins. This is only 2. So the only thing that comes close is right here, 3 pins. But that is unlikely to be it, because the way this is keyed and the way that's keyed. So while I might make it work, I'm not going to do that. All right, how about this? Power. Do we care about that? Not at all. All we're going to do is hook up this to the back. Which SATA connection do we want to use? The SATA DOM port, which is doubling SATA 0? Well, let's just see which one works out with the least kind of hassle from a wiring perspective. And I'm also going to need to think about, where do I want to put these cables that I'm not going to be using at all? All right, here we go. Assembly time. As I'm working with the system, I'll say what I may have said before, but I'm not sure. It's pretty thin gauge metal, so you want to go easy on things so we don't deform the metal and just make it, tougher to make it fit the next time we go to use it. Okay, so with some downward pressure, I got this locked in place and the screw holes at the top now lining up. So that was easy enough. Now, time to fit SATA in there. So it's keyed, of course. I'm going to go like this. Boy, is that tight to the fan. And the whole fan assembly moved a little on me, but it's on rubber isolation brackets. But now we've got some wires impinging a bit. All right, let's think about this. DIMMs here, CPU here. Where do I want to take away the spare cabling and hide it? And which SATA do I want to use that's most accessible? I think the answer is pretty clear for SATA. Looks like I want to go with one of those two. Or maybe I can go with one that's further to take up a little slack, right? Just different ways of looking at that there. So, yep, a little bit sharp in the metal, and that front foot just keeps giving me a little trouble. It's a little tighter than I would like. To get this in and out, and there we go. Again, I'm just being very cautious. It's not difficult, I'm just trying to be patient and cautious. All right, I think this connector is a nice compromise. It'll take up some of the slack naturally, and it doesn't get near the CPU as much. So whether you go SATA 0, SATA 1, it doesn't matter. They're all Intel full-speed SATA 3 chips. Makes no difference whatsoever. Okay. That's it. The other two cables I mentioned I'm going to completely ignore. So that's about it for installing and driving the system. 4 screws, some somewhat unusual cables that are kind of atypically too long in this particular chassis. This has some voltage in it, some pins, but you're really unlikely to short them. I'd say tucking them right there is a decent choice. And how about this power? I think I'd rather leave the CPU open and get rid of some of that slack over in that same area. So just a second loop, and that's it. Unfortunately, we're going right in front of the CPUs again. Sorry, the fans again, which are doubling as CPU fans. They're chassis fans that blow air across the CPU. I'm not worried about tucking things behind here because there's no airflow over there. So I think tucking cables to the right is the right choice. Okay, that's about it. Ready to put a lid on it. As soon as I fasten those back 2 screws. So we've got the silver colored screws that are inside that nobody's going to see to fasten first. Very nice. And the lid, simple enough. 2 holes means 2 holes. And little hooks means we slide from the back. That's it. Easy. Now this video is going to be filled with me talking, partly because I have so much to do this weekend and get done. Any post-production editing may have to wait. This may go up raw the way it is. All right. These stickers, again, if it was my own machine, I'd probably love to relocate them on the bottom. But notice what it says, warranty void if removed. Interesting choice there. Also noticed something I forgot to mention last night was these side ventils. So air sucking in the front has plenty of places to open in the back, even with my cables. You know, the multiple cables that are inside the case as you try to get air to flow right through it. So now I know the system's assembled. Do a quick weight check. Calibrate the scale, there we go. Let's see how we do. Okay, 57 ounces. That is terrible contrast. Let's try that again, sorry about that. Much better. Again, it's zeroed out. Wow, that light is just blowing out the measurement. Okay, 57.8 or 1,638 grams. Let's move on to the next assembly, followed by weigh-in. And then we can get to the moment that everyone's waiting for, the power on. All right, so last night I talked a little bit about the metal that's rather thin here over the PCI bracket. This part's fine. It's not really moving or flexing much. But boy, this panel, just the fact that they had very small bit of metal holding it with the slightest pressure loosening it, unfortunately has now led me to a demo unit that I'm bringing to VMworld with a broken feeling part. So I got to think about how I'm going to refasten that. Since I don't really have plans to put a PCI card in, I don't have a right angle adapter to make that happen anyway. All right, let's get the accessory box for this bigger system. Got the bigger box, bigger power supply, but you know what? This cabling is the same stuff. Is there anything else we need out of there? Well, some hard drive screws would be awful handy. It's not labeled HDD, and there's only 3 of them. So I think that's just a mistake. Maybe wrong bag and wrong quantity of screws. Not really sure. Could be an early production unit. Don't really know. Moving right along, going to need those screws for the hard drive, excuse me. And it's time to get out the next Micron SSD. There we go. The same M510 data center. Now the logic on the SSDs that were chosen. Why this model? Again, I'm just going to leave the brackets since I'm not using it. Why this model? Well, DC implies data center, right? And you can already see where we're headed with that. If we want any chance of vSAN compatibility, which is the way things are headed with the loaner gear that Micron is shipping to me, well, we want to go with data center products for vSAN compatibility. All right, need I say more? So stay tuned for future fun with my home lab. All right, now, same deal here. We got screw holes. We've got a plate to slide on. We just want to make sure we're on the right track for where I put the hard drive on. So just like last night, we discovered there's no clearance here, but there's plenty of clearance here. And that's where our SATA is going to attach. So that was pretty simple. Just to get myself oriented from back to where I was last night. So it's pretty obvious we're going to use those holes. Plenty of air right there, right? All right. Okay, so only 2 of those screws fit. The other one is a different shape. So again, this is a little odd. let's just move along now and get this going. All right, this cable can go on before or after. I don't see that it's going to matter at all. It's nice that it's got plenty of clearance. So it's a good design right there. No problem whatsoever fitting it. All right, well, remember I said same cable, so it's got the same tiny connector. This is a different motherboard design. Flex ATX means totally different layout, different revision. No, not totally different layout, but mostly just wider over here. And again, I'm looking for where I could possibly connect that cable without spending too much time searching for it. And again, I do not see a place in the motherboard that it makes sense to attempt to attach that undocumented. Again, we've got similar connectors, but they're 3 pins, not 2. So just move right along and finish putting this together. Okay, that was ridiculously easy. So what am I doing? I'm trying to kind of rehearse for which SATA port do I want to use again. Furthest one away to take up slack probably makes sense again. So it's going to be the same deal. Let's go with, oh, different design. That's right, we get SATA over here and here. I'm going to go with blue. If you're a SATA DOM fan, you'd want to keep those free. SATA disk on module, they're called. All right, where's my Molex connector? It's over here. And again, this takes quite a bit of pressure to plug in. So I'm going to focus, forget about talking for a moment, and just plug that in. Okay. Next, SATA. All right, if I plug it in oriented away like this, I think the cable will tuck in nicely. Okay, what's next? More stuff to get rid of. Not a whole lot going on over here past the DIMMs, and I've never seen that part of the motherboard get very hot. So again, we're just tucking one cable in and doing something very similar with the other cable. Tiny cable. And then finally, the last one, all behind that front power button that we touched to turn the machine on rather soon. All right, that worked out quite easily. There's more room in this case, naturally. No airflow issue. Okay, and the SATA cable now, sorry, the signal cable, or power cable for SATA is further away from the fan, so there's really less obstruction here. Okay, lighting is a challenge. Okay. Interior, 3 screws need to go on after making sure they're lined up. And now 2 black screws are going to finish this off. So, again, screw holes, going to need to align. Both holes are available, and hooks on the side, which means we lay it down a little bit towards the back of the case, and we're going to slide it towards the front to get this thing assembled. That's it. Again, me being super delicate probably made that look more difficult than it is. Not sure how I worded that. Me being super delicate or my handling being super delicate. Try to ensure I don't bend the sheet metal. All right, so Time for the scale. Do a little weigh in here. This one's coming in at 71.4 ounces. 2,024 grams. All right, time to set up for a little watt burn comparison. And grab some Windows 10 install media. I'm probably going to start with that first, partly because I want to activate by midnight, so I have myself a free copy. If it's midnight Eastern, could be 3 a.m. Eastern. I don't really know. All right, let me think about this. So for powering on the first one, everyone wants to know the noise. So you're going to have to resituate the cameras, get a little wider angle lens, make sure you can read the screen of the watt meter. And I have a secondary phone that's going to help, that shows the spectrum, or the different frequencies that are being put out. Kind of does a better job of characterizing the noise, not just the overall dB output, but the annoying levels that are at certain frequencies that you just find irritating. So I'm going to cut this video off now and set up for the first power on next. Thank you for watching. Come on back.